Alrighty, we're going to be in 2 Timothy chapter 3 this evening, 2 Timothy chapter 3. We saw last time when we were in chapter 2, Paul was doing a lot of time telling Timothy how to be a good soldier for Christ, how to stand strong for Christ. He's even telling him some things to avoid at the end of the chapter. And he's going to continue talking about, he's going to talk a little bit about false teachers, but just people falling away or people not following Christ. And as he mentions the last days. So he's going to talk about all of this and the importance of ignoring those things, not being involved with those things. Basically, avoid the trash that is surrounding us in society. The society decisions that they make that are separate of God, that are in opposition to the Lord. The world just continuing to go farther and farther into walking according to the lusts of the flesh. And all of these things that we're going to look at tonight, none of these, and whenever we look around our society and the evil that we see, none of these things are new. Sin has existed since Adam first sinned. And it has existed all the way since. I mean, whenever God wiped the face of the earth, I guarantee you it was much worse than it was today. We see with Sodom and Gomorrah as well, that God wiping them off the face of the planet indicates that the things that we're seeing around us, they've existed in the past. But as we get closer and closer to Christ returning, they're going to become more and more common. And because of that, because of the sin that is going to surround us more and more, the world is also going to reject God's people more and more. Whenever the Antichrist comes onto the scene, there will be a time when he will outright attack the Lord's saints. But even before the Antichrist comes, people are going to be attacking the Lord's saints. One of the things that I'm of the opinion of is that in the majority of the world that all of the Lord's churches, true churches, are going to be underground whenever we see the end times take place. I don't think there's any possibility of the Lord's churches being above ground, the true churches being above ground whenever the things of Revelation and other end times prophecy takes place. It's just not going to happen. Because what we see is people outright rejecting Christ on a global scale. These things are going to come. In many, I believe it is very close. I would think most believe that. Many expect it within their lifetime. Regardless of when it actually happens, we're closer today than we were yesterday. And whenever it does, whenever things do start to get harder, and if you are of the belief that it's going to happen very, very soon, then you better be working hard to prepare. And even if you don't think it's going to be very soon, you need to be preparing so it doesn't catch you off guard. These things that Paul is talking about, they're not only just, first and foremost, the things that we see of end times are for us to know what is coming. It talks about Christ coming as a thief in the night, but to the believers that are aware and are watching, it shouldn't be all that much of a surprise. But also in seeing these things take place, we need to be working hard to strengthen ourselves and prepare ourselves for what is coming. Do not expect to be able to follow the Lord and to worship the Lord as openly as we do today. With as fast as our society just goes down the drain on almost a daily basis, It would not surprise me to wake up tomorrow and it be illegal to be who we are. It would not surprise me. Or for there very much to just be laws that prevent us from being able to follow the Lord 100%. Would not surprise me. And we need to be prepared for it. See, in Hebrews even, that the writer tells us that as we see the day approaching, we need to be assembling together more. We need to be working together more. We need to be strengthening ourselves as an individual and ourselves as a body more as we see these things unfold. You know, with the things that are taking place right now in our state, in our county and surrounding counties, it should very much so make you ready to watch and to be preparing for whatever may happen. But we need to see these things, and so we're going to look at these warnings that Paul is going to be talking about. So let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and then we'll dive into this. Lord, I thank you for the many blessings that you offer to us. I thank you for this blessing we have to be here together as a body inside this building that you provided for us, and to enjoy each other's company and fellowship, Lord. I'd ask right now that you would open your word to our hearts. Please help us to grow from these things, to better understand them. And we can be closer to you, and we can be more prepared to serve you every day. I ask that you guide me and direct me as I share your word, and that everything would be for your honor, your glory, and your will. In Jesus' name, amen. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, says, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come." I was talking about that as we see the day approaching of Christ coming, that we need to be strengthening ourselves because things are going to get harder for the Lord's believer, for the Lord's people. He tells us here, he says, we see here, it says, in the last days, the word last means farthest, final. As we get to the very end of events, before end time events take place, the more we get into it, he says that as we get to the end, perilous times shall come. And this word perilous means dangerous, fierce. Well, the times, the way things are going to be in the end, in the last days, are going to be very, very dangerous. I believe they're going to be dangerous for people that are not believers for different things, but they're going to be extremely dangerous for the Lord's people. Because as we're going to look at these things, we're going to see that the things that will be taking place are the exact opposite of the Lord. People are going to be warring against the Lord's saints. People are going to be openly attacking and trying to destroy his churches and his people. We even see it today in our country, and it's not quite so much out in the open. They're still trying to conceal it to some extent. But it is becoming more and more open every day. They're not, people, it's not an outright illegal for us to do this, but there are people that are trying to pass that in the legislation. That I believe that if we have just a few more, if our society goes just a little bit farther towards sin, that they'll very easily be able to pass those things. And barring a revival and a turning towards the Lord in our country, this is what's going to take place. It's going to be dangerous. going to be hard. It will not be easy as it is right now. Right now is easy. And this is the thing that's concerning for those that claim to believers, that right now it is hard for them to follow the Lord. And I'm not saying everything's perfect right now. But if we are unable to follow the Lord right now when things are relatively easy, you are going to have a very, very hard time whenever things get rough. And they will. And I'm not saying that to try and discourage you and to tell you you just need to quit. What I'm telling you is I'm trying to warn you that you need to be strengthening yourself. You need to be growing in your walk with the Lord so that you have the strength to do that. One of the things that we often fall guilty of is waiting until the problem comes before we try and get the tools and the things necessary, the strength necessary in our relationship with the Lord to deal with the problem. And whenever things are easy, we don't take advantage of that time to grow. Right now is the time to be using this time of freedom to strengthen your relationship with God, to prepare yourself. I don't know how I will respond. I don't know how all of us will respond because we haven't actually lived it yet. But I can guarantee this: if we are not strong in the Word and in our relationship with God, you will have a very, very, very high chance of failing miserably and being very discouraged. But things working out for the better, and you being able to see the joy in the midst of trial, as Paul always did. Will be as a direct result of being strong in the Lord. Paul, when he wrote, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me, he's talking about Christ strengthening him no matter what was taking place in his life. No matter how bad it was, no matter how good it was. The reason he stood strong is because he was strong in Christ. He had built a trust with Christ. We need to be strengthening right now. Now, Paul is going to write about the way that people are going to be in the end times. Something I want us to notice is that all of these are opposite of what a believer is supposed to be. They're the opposite of a believer. These are things of people that are walking in the world. So as I said, naturally, for those that are following the Lord, we are going to be in direct odds with them. Our values, our desires are going to be the opposite of everything that the world around us wants and does. So we will be at odds with them. As we get closer and closer to the end time events, as we get closer to the return of Christ, we should have less and less in common with the world around us. What is sad is that there are many churches that have more and more in common with the world. As we get closer to Christ, there should be more things that the world doesn't like about us. There should be more things about the world that you do not like, that make you uncomfortable. Because the world is going farther and farther into sin, and you are supposed to be living outside of sin. Sin is something that is supposed to disgust you, is supposed to make your gut turn. As we get closer and closer to the return of Christ, there should be bigger and bigger changes in people that leave the world to come to Christ. the good thing as well is just because all of these things are going to get worse and worse around us, that means that our light is going to be brighter and brighter. Or so perceived. The light is very bright in the darkest of times. But the world is not going to like that light. So they love their darkness. And they will love it more. In verse 5, we even notice at the end of this section where he talks about all these things, he even tells Timothy, from such turn away. Of these things that we see, when we recognize that these things, we need to be very actively turning away from these things. We should not be indulging ourselves in them. We should be turning away from these societal things, these things that are happening in society. Now, it does not mean that we forsake sharing the gospel with people. It means that we are not indulging, we are not participating in these things that our society is doing. We stand against them. When everybody around us tells us, yeah, you need to be doing it, we should be saying, no, I shouldn't. So let's see what he says of these people. Verse 2, he says, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. And it's not just the men that are going to love it. He's talking about all people. Human race. As they continue, people are going to love themselves. They're going to be very consumed with themselves. They're only going to be worried about how does this affect me? What does this do for me? I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I'll step on anybody and everybody I have to make sure I get to the top. It's the mindset that you're going to be. And I want us to notice the very next one he sees, and I think he picks these two together for a reason. He says, they're also covetous. Oftentimes, these two things can go hand in hand together. Because people that are very consumed with themselves, they look around and see things that they want. And they do everything they can to gain those things. They're never happy with the place that they are in as a person. They're never happy with not being at the very top and not having everything that they possibly can. Plus more. This word covetous, actually, the word means a lover of silver. Basically what he's talking about here is the love of money that we see in 1 Timothy. These people are going to be very consumed with themselves, and they're also going to be very consumed with money and material things. And so they're going to do everything they can to elevate themselves to get as much money as they possibly can, and to make them the very best that they can be. What is the opposite for the believer? We love God and we love everybody else. And we don't love money. We're very content with what we have. We're more concerned with the well-being of holding up other people. We're willing to sacrifice our own selves for the betterment of somebody else. This is the exact opposite of being willing to sacrifice everybody else for yourself. It continues. They're covetous, and they are boasters, and they are proud. They have a very arrogant feel about themselves. They think of themselves as being very great and very amazing. Very arrogantly think that they are superior to everybody else. And they tell everybody about being superior and better. And make sure you know how arrogant they are. They think very well of themselves, and they make sure you know how well they think of themselves. How good they are. What does a believer do? A believer sees themselves as being loved, and very humble, and they serve, and they build up each other. They speak well of each other. They speak well of the things that others have been able to accomplish, and they try to hold other people out of a problem. They don't take advantage of a problem in somebody else's life to elevate themselves. They go to bring that person out of it. Do not talk about themselves. Think of Paul, talking about his failures, his weaknesses, ways that he needed the Lord and other people even. You not see Paul talking about, you not see other believers, true believers are following God, talking about how great they are. They talk about how great everyone else is, how great the Lord is. Continuing, we're talking about the words. They're also blasphemers. And I believe that Paul is talking specifically here about blaspheming towards the Lord. They will mock, they will be very verbally abusive towards the Lord and things they say and those that follow him. They will not say nice things about the Lord. As we get closer and closer, more and more we'll deny the Lord. We'll actively fight against him, which in and of itself is proof of God not existing, because why you have to argue against something that you don't believe exists. But they will fight against him. They will argue against him. Next one, disobedient to parents. This word disobedient means unpersuadable. Basically it means his parents will have no control over their children. And what also this teaches us that those in authority will have no control over those that are supposed to be underneath them. Nobody will listen. And just rebel in every way. Of course, he is speaking specifically about the parents, and I think a very accurate representation of this would be the teenager that didn't get their way. And you'll also see more and more children throwing tantrums. Those that by age are adults, but as maturity are children still throwing tantrums. You will not be able to persuade them. You will not be able to tell them what is right and what is wrong. They will do whatever they please. They will probably do against whatever you say just because that's what they want to do. And it will become more common. What does a believer do? The believer listens to those in authority. The believer listens to their parents. Follows them. Is very easily persuaded by wise counsel. Listens to it. Values it. They'll be disobedient, and then they will be unthankful. Not only are these people going to want anything and everything under the sun, and want everything their way, want everything to go according to what they want and what they desire, but whenever it does go the way that they want it, they're not going to be thankful for it. They're going to be upset about it. They're going to want more. Think of the child that is constantly bribed to do what is right. Eventually the child gets to a certain point where all it ever does is acts out to get more of the bribe. They're never happy with what they have. They always want more. And even if you give it, they're still unhappy with you because you didn't give them enough. We'll see people that are not thankful for anything. It would be unholy. I like it here. He is listing unholy things. And he just outright says, and they're going to be unholy. They're not going to be listening to the Lord. They're going to be very, very wicked. Will not listen to the things that are holy. Notice in verse 3, the next thing he says is they will be without natural affection. Basically, what is going to happen here is what is natural for people to have affection for those that they are supposed to have affection for, they were not going to have that anymore. What we will see, what we are already seeing, was parents not loving children, children not loving their parents, men loving men instead of women. People even being upset with themselves and wanting their own, being upset with their own genders even. The things that are natural, the things that are designed to be a certain way, people do not care about that anymore. Do not love them. Continues, says they will be truce breakers. They will not be able to hold a deal. Yeah, it used to be, a man's handshake was all you needed to seal the deal. And they'd always back it up. They'd always stand on it. Now you have a 100-page contract that you have to initial and sign on every single page, and still people won't follow it. People will still fight it and act like they don't have to follow it. You have people that you think you can trust them, and you make a deal and they say, oh, you didn't put it in writing, so I don't have to follow it. The word means nothing. Think of the Antichrist and his peace treaty with Israel. Even now, peace treaties amongst countries. Say one thing and they're holding their fingers behind the back, knowing full well they aren't going to fall. They aren't going to do it. A Christian, your yes means yes and your no means no. Say what you mean what you say. There will be false accusers. People will be going around slandering people's name, making stuff up. Well, this one is just everywhere. You can't believe 90% of the stuff on Facebook, because 90% of it's just made up that somebody was mad about. They're mad about it. I mean, I remember a couple years back that a teacher, a parent was mad because a teacher didn't treat their special child well enough. And I forget all of the details, social media, and it went viral. And it came out that the teacher had actually bent over backwards for the person. It was the kid wanted to be in a play. And it never showed up to any of the practices, never tried out for anything, and they showed up to it and was like, put my kid in it. So the teacher bent over backwards to try and give the kid a part, and the kid acted out in the play, and the teacher still didn't allow them to do what they expected the child to do the play right. The parent got upset and made this huge thing. It came out the teacher was bending over backwards to try and please them, and the parent just wasn't happy with it, and made up a huge story to slander that teacher's name. Had death threats being sent to the teacher, all kinds of things. You see it every day. You get the Salem witch trials. You won't be running around calling everybody a witch, but it would be the equivalent of it. And as he continues, he says they will be incontinent. This word means without self-control. They won't be able to control their urges. So, is the thing is amazing how true this is, and that you have people that literally just can't control themselves. They just act on whatever goes through their head. You just do it. Have no thought for consequences. Have no thought for what it'll do to even themselves. They just do it. He even says they will be fierce. These two go hand in hand. This word fierce means savage. It brings the idea of like an untamed beast. Basically, people are going to be running around like wild animals. Both of it, neither one having any control, having any sense. Just run around like a bunch of chickens with their heads chopped off. You know, you may think people won't be acting like animals, but there's already people in the world that act like animals. It'll happen. And he says they will despise. He says they will be despisers of those that are good. Again, another very clear statement about the world fighting against the Lord's people. Because, as I said, the greater the darkness becomes, the greater our light is going to be perceived. They're going to see the good in us, and they're going to hate it. They're going to despise it with every part of their being. The reason, as I mentioned earlier, that people, atheists that don't believe in God, feeling they have the need to argue against God, the reason for that is because they despise good. They want to live in their sin. They want to live in their darkness. And so they want to fight against it. They want to end it so that they can continue walking in their sin. So they can continue walking in the darkness. The word despiser it literally means hostile. You might think that people despise us now, but they will despise us more. It will be hostile to us. As he continues, he says they would be traitors. They will betray people. Have a bunch of double agents running around. They will be heady. This word heady, it's kind of the idea of falling forward. Basically, you think of somebody that is very reckless, and their body gets up in front of their feet, and they fall forward. Basically, they move too quick for their own good, and it gets them into trouble. Makes them reckless. People will just jump on the bandwagon and cause all kinds of destruction. It will be high-minded. High-minded. Have an inflated ego. Be up in the clouds. Be lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. So this defines most of the reason why the rest of this all exists. Because they love their own pleasures, their own lusts more than God. They care more about all the other things around them, all the other lusts of the flesh that they think is pleasing them. Don't care at all about God. Care more about gaining what they want here and now, and being worried about what will happen when they stand before the Lord. Continues in 5, he says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. And he finishes this off here. It says that they will have a form of godliness. They will look like they are godly. They will have actions that may look as if they are God. There will be those that look very much so like they're God. But as he says here, they will be denying the power thereof. Basically, they will be consumed with their words and still denying the Lord. Christianity is not about the actions. It is about following God and the actions flowing from it, coming as a result of it. These people, they will just be consumed in their actions. They will not be consumed with God, with the Lord. Be denying the power of Christ in salvation. And many other things of the power of God. Well, even those that make up, they won't be following him. Nor are works separate of God. Without Christ as our personal Lord and Savior, mean absolutely nothing. There is filthy rags. God despises our works when we are still enveloped in sin. We do not have Christ. They are only good when they are a result in the relationship with God. So he tells them, turn away from all of this. Leave it behind. Ignore it. And he continues talking about the people that walk in this. He says in verse 6, "For of this sort are they which creep in the houses and lead captive silly women, laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." He talks about these people coming in, and literally, when it says here to lead captive, it is basically literally taking them and dragging them captive. In captivity, as a slave. A home is supposed to be a place of safety, sheltered from. But when we allow these things to be in our lives, and we allow people that are indulging in these things to be within our home, they will drag other people away. And he tells us about these, and it will. We need to be very concerned about this as well, because even if it does not affect you, there may be those that are around you that it will affect if you allow it to continue around you. Because he says here, the ones that this will affect are the silly women laden with sins. And, I don't think he's talking about here that only women are subject to this. This is both men and women, but he's talking about one that is weak spiritually. The word silly means foolish. Basically saying those that are foolish in a spiritual sense will be led away by this, will be dragged away. Because they are not wise in the word, they're not wise spiritually, and they're also laden with sins. Sin still has a very strong hold on them. Whether they are lost or they're very young in the faith. Sin can still have a very strong hold. And these people that come in, that are indulging in their sins, they will convince them that it is okay to continue in their sin. And so those people will follow because it makes them feel better. We see this all over people claiming to be preachers and preaching that it's okay to continue in your sin. To continue doing things that Scripture teaches very clearly that we are not to be continuing in. And people flock to them. People run to them because it makes them feel good about the sin that is in their life. And if we allow that to be around us, we may allow those people to have an effect on others that even though it may not affect us, it may affect others. Parents, it is of the utmost importance to protect your child from those that may harm them, both physically and spiritually. It says, verse 7, he says there, those are led away are ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, it is very possible to be very well read and still have very much so the wrong belief. To be dead wrong. So, we need to be very careful with what we're consuming. You see, far too often those that are so excited about some new fad in the Christian world that they very quickly run to those things and it drags them away. Now, it is important to learn, but we need to be aware of what we are learning. To be studying the right things. It is not enough just to be learning. Because you can learn everything and miss the truth. to be able to come. There are people who are very, very, very wise. But they die not knowing Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. There are people that devoted their lives to studying Islam or Catholicism that died not knowing the truth. And it says of these, he provides an example here, those that are walking in the world and standing against the world's God's people. He says in verse 8, now as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds reprobate concerning the truth. What he's referring to here is when Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh, and they we had the times where those Pharaoh, his magicians, tried to mimic the miracles of God. We see them do it with when Aaron's staff turns into a snake, and then also with the Nile turning to blood. They did their own things to stand against it, to try and work against it. Now, Scripture doesn't actually mention these men's names anywhere except for here. We don't really know for sure exactly how Paul knew these things. There's a couple of theories with it. First and foremost, the Lord is able to give anybody the information that they need. He's inspired His Word. But also, Paul was a very well-studied Jew before becoming a Christian. He made things, and from what I understand, are also Jewish writings that actually mention this, that it's oral tradition that is passed down, that he very well could have known and supplied. But regardless of how he came of this information, the illustration here, the point, is still very much so of importance, is that their only desire is to stand against the truth and to try and undermine it in every way that they can. Those that are indulging in the world, they're walking in all of these things, their desire is to do everything they can to push back against the Lord, to undermine His messengers and His people. They will resist it. They are men of corrupt minds. They are reprobate concerning the truth, or concerning the faith. They have no value concerning the faith. They do not present anything of value for those that are following the Lord. Well, and this is something that I think we need to be aware of, because I hear this from time to time of believers saying that they need to watch certain things or stay up to date on certain things that are just outright sin, because they need to know what is going on. No. I'll tell you what's going on in the world: sin. You indulging in those things does not provide any value. Listening to those whose only desire is to fight the world or fight the Lord accomplishes nothing. And he says in verse 9, but they shall proceed no further, for their folly shall be manifest unto all men, as theirs also was. He says, and they are not going to continue. And it should not be. And I think this is in two parts, that we need to stop those that are teaching false things. Stand against them. Do not allow them to continue pushing forward. And also, if we are seeking the truth and we are only allowing the truth to be preached and to be taught, those that teach false things, those that are teaching the darkness, when we are teaching what is right, when we are teaching the truth, it is going to show other people exactly how wrong they are. An example I was given is used to a way that they would, from what I understand, they don't do this anymore, but a way that they would help teach cashiers and bankers how to see the difference between a counterfeit and a real one. So they'd actually spend a lot of time training you everything that is about a real bill. And the theory was that if they knew everything about the real one, when the counterfeit came across, they would know it was a counterfeit because it didn't have a quality of the real one. If we are consumed with the truth, and we are constantly teaching the truth, it's going to shine a light on the falsehood around us. You don't have to tell people what is false because you're telling them what is true. And this is the thing. I think oftentimes we try to fight against sin and falsehood in our society. We want to attack those things. And we forget to teach what is true. We forget to teach the truth. I talk about things that are sin when preaching, but I don't talk about the politics of things. Those sins may be in politics, but I don't talk about politics because my goal is to teach you what is true, and then you will know what is true in politics. You will know which candidates are following the Lord, if there are any. Because you know what the truth is. We go around trying to fight the evil that is around us. We go around trying to do all of these things. And in the process, we forget to talk about the truth. And the way that we stop the false things is by teaching the truth. Telling people what is true. So I want us to remember now, as we see things slowly getting worse and worse, that we need to be strengthening each other, ourselves. And as you see these things becoming more and more common, it should cause you to think more and more about Christ's return. It should give you more and more motivation to work harder and to prepare for Him coming. It should also give you desire to preach the truth, to make aware of what is false by preaching what is true.